Well, hi everybody. I'm Anna Johnson and I'm hosting the Church360 Ledger Overview webinar today. I just wanted to thank you all for coming. I know that when we were getting ready, Paul was saying that he could hear me and see my screen. Those of you that came right on time a little bit later, if you could leave me a message in the chat just to let me know if you can hear me or see my screen, that would be great so we can know we're off to a great start here. If at any time you lose touch with me, just leave another message in the chat and we'll try and get things sorted out as soon as possible. We're going to get right into it here because we only have about an hour and we want to make sure that we get through all the material today. So, Church360 Ledger, we're talking today about efficiently tracking your church finances. So we're going to talk about all the different features of Ledger and especially the features that make it easy to quickly manage your church finances even if you don't necessarily have a finance background. I'm Anna Johnson. As I said before, I'm a marketing manager here at Concordia Publishing House. You can see my email and my phone number are over there on the screen. If at any time after the webinar or even during, if you think of a question, just give me a call or send me an email and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. Just a quick overview about us. Concordia Technology Solutions is the church administration of Concordia Publishing House. And although computer software hasn't been around for that long of a period of time, Concordia Publishing House definitely has. You can see here's a picture of us way back in the day at the 1904 World's Fair. So at that time, many things were different, not only about CPH, but definitely with computer software. They didn't have any of the technology we had today. But one thing that stayed the same is our passion for sharing the gospel and helping churches as they continue in that good work of sharing the gospel. Here is a picture of us today. You can see things have changed quite a bit. Since 1984, we've been developing software for churches. So usually we have one or two people in this webinar that are familiar with some of our products, especially Shepherd Staff, which are our PC-based, not web-based version of computer software. So we thank those of you who've been with us since 1984, and we thank those of you for coming who are new to us and don't know much about what we have to offer. Just a quick outline of what we'll be going through today. We have about 60 minutes for the presentation, and then if need be, we can have 30 minutes for questions. So if at any time you have a question, feel free to ask it through that same checkbox where you guys submitted your questions before. If it's pertinent to the slide I'm on, I'll get to it then. Otherwise, I'll definitely try and circle back around to all your questions before we end today. As we said in the emails leading up to the webinar, the recording for this will be shared. So if there's somebody at your church who couldn't make it today, you can definitely forward them the email that I'll send later this afternoon with the complete recording. A little bit about Church360 Ledger. Ledger is part of a suite of products which we call Church360 Complete Church Management. The two other products in that suite are Church360 Members, which helps you to track your membership information. You can track things like offerings, attendance, you can have a calendar of different events at your church, and of course all your members' contact information. And then we also have Church360 Unite, which is our church website builder software. Earlier in this week, my supervisor, Peter Frank, gave webinars on Members and Unite. So if you'd like to check out the whole suite, I definitely encourage you to watch those videos as well. They're definitely informative. And today we'll talk a little bit about how Church360 Ledger and Members work together as well. When we were designing Church360 Ledger, we wanted to have these three things in mind. We wanted it to be intuitive because we know that not everybody that's helping out with finances at your church knows a lot about software or about finance. So we wanted to make the software easy to use for everyone. But of course, since we're dealing with money and personal information sometimes, we wanted to make sure that the software was secure. That's especially important, we know, with web-based software, and that was one thing we kept in mind when developing Ledger. The third thing we were keeping in mind as we wrote this software, as our developers work on it, was we wanted it to be focused. There's plenty of accounting softwares out there for general accounting, for different types of businesses, but not all of them have that same focus on churches that we like to have. And so when we were designing Ledger, We did it based on fund accounting so that people at church could track finances the way you want to, not the way necessarily a Fortune 500 business or something else would track that. Keep moving ahead there. Like I said, today we're doing the overview. I'll go through a tour of the software and have questions and answers. And before we get into that, we all know that talking about church finances can be very difficult. We all have been either sitting in church, or some of you might be pastors here and you have the stewardship Sunday. And for a lot of people, they're uncomfortable about that. But when we're talking about church finances, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It's really a joy to give in the Lord, because every dollar that goes to your church is a donation, and people who give to your church give from their heart. They're giving for the sake of the gospel. And because we know this, we want to be good stewards of everything we have. We want to make sure every dime and penny is accounted for. And we also want to make sure that as a church, we're being accountable for all those expenses and also for the income that comes in. So what exactly does accountability look like at a church? There's kind of a twofold view we take on this. On one hand, accountability, let me go ahead here, accountability means that we're preventing the ill intention from doing wrong. And I always get a little nervous when I get to this slide, because we all hate to think about the fact that there might be people who are coming to take advantage of churches, but we all might know somebody who their church has been in a rough situation because somebody came in and thought you were an easy target. That's the one half of accountability, is designing software and practices that prevent those types of people from doing wrong. And Church360 Ledger, as you'll see in just a few minutes, has checks in the system. We have an event log and user permissions so that you can always track who does what in the software, so that you can always go back and find where dimes and dollars went. But also, the second half of accountability is that you're preventing the well-intentioned around you from making mistakes. We all make mistakes all the time. I was just getting ready for the webinar this morning, and I had seen, when I originally set this up, so many just typos and little things that I did without even thinking about it that really could have messed up our test book here. And so another reason we have those event logs and other checks built into the software is to help you out, to make sure that even if you were not attempting to make a mistake, we can still correct those and get back where you want to be. So in a congregation, we know that you have all sorts of different people helping out. Excuse me. You have volunteer ministry treasurers. Some of you might have a paid finance coordinator. You have an elected church treasurer, or even a whole board of finance. And so when we were thinking about these groups of people at the church, we kind of divided them into two separate camps, and we focused on these two key personas. The church treasurer is the person who is an experienced accountant. He wants to see all over aspects of his church, cares deeply about the details, and relies on that tracking in the audit trail. This is a person who might be a financial manager in their day job, or might be a retired financial manager and has graciously given up his time or her time to come help out at your church. And we wanted to make sure that for someone like that, the software did its job, that it was accurate and thorough and gave him all the details he would need to give reports and to track finances at your church. But we also know that alongside that church financier, you might also have just willing volunteers at your church who are just used to balancing their checkbook at home or entering transactions. But someone who cares about your ministry, who has volunteered when there was no one else to help out, and really tries not to make a mistake. So when we were developing the software, we kept both of these people in mind so that both of them could get what they needed and also use the software autonomously. So what we'll do today, keeping those two people in mind, I'll give you a real life example. Today we're going to walk through just a high level overview. I especially want to talk about all the things in Ledger that make it quick and easy, that save you time, either opening up another spreadsheet or doing math for yourself. I'll go through all the areas of the software, and by the end of the day, I hope you can answer this question: how can I use Church360 Ledger to support my ministry? So in church finances, we know there are multiple income streams, multiple expense accounts, and a specific budget, and that different people need access and to have reporting. So in our example today, I'm going to just take a closer look into one of the church funds your church might have. We're going to take a look at an example of how you could track finances for your music department at your church. Now you could do this with any department, whether it's youth or music, just the general fund. That'll just be our story to get us going today. And I think I've talked enough about the intro, and I really want to get into the software. So let's get started. It'll take me a couple minutes here just to get everything up on my screen. You can see that this right here is the sign-on screen for Ledger. And you always have this specific URL with a subdomain here. This part I'm highlighting right here, which let me zoom in a little bit right now. This little ccc.360ledger.com is called your subdomain. So whether you're a paying customer or you just want to try out the trial for Ledger, you'll always have a subdomain. That means you can get to Ledger from anywhere, whether you're at home or at church or on the road. You just need to type this address into your browser and you'll get there. Now each church will have a different one, like St. Paul's.360ledger.com, things like that. You'll be able to sign up for that when you sign up for the trial. You'll also have a unique login, and this login is unique to you. So if you have 4 or 5 people at your church who are using Ledger, they can all log in separately. And we'll talk a little bit later about how all those people have separate permissions for their login. Just a couple more things down here. If at any time you forget your password, you can always reset it online. You don't have to call us. Or if you're just starting out with Ledger and you lost that welcome email, you can request to receive those unlock instructions here from the home page. I'm going to get signed in. Just a brief tour of what the homepage of Ledger looks like. Everybody's homepage will look like this. Up here in the top bar, you can see here's the Ledger logo. That'll always take you back to this homepage. And then here's a selector to select through your books. So most churches, especially if you're a smaller church, you might only have one book. But if you have a school or a preschool, you might want to keep those finances in a separate place. So this is how you flip between books. You can see I don't have anything in my school book. It's just for demonstration, but you can easily flip back and forth. You'll get a confirmation message at the top. Here's all our icons that get us to different places. This is our print icon if we have any printed checks coming up. This is the icon that shows our pending transactions. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. But just to show you, this is our Church360 members icon. So Ledger does sync with members, and you can have your offering batches come over quickly and easily. This is our reports icon. There's 4 main reports in Ledger. Your general ledger report, income and expense report, chart of accounts, and balance sheet report. You can get to this report screen from anywhere on Ledger, and we'll get into those a little bit later as well. Here is your settings cog where you can choose your settings, set up your chart of accounts, budgets, and fiscal years. And then here's your personal login settings where you can change your user settings. You'll also notice right the second bar from the top here is a new transaction icon. This is available for anywhere in the software. So whether you're entering transactions or setting a budget or setting your chart of accounts, it's always easy to get to your transactions. You can see we're on the home page now. You can show or hide these 4 mini graphs here: assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. And then this larger graph shows the conglomeration of those. So assets with your total assets minus your liabilities. You have the option in some views to export to Excel. So if you prefer working in Excel, or maybe you're doing some work online and then need to take it somewhere where you won't be online, you can always export to Excel. You can print any of these views. So if you were a treasurer and wanted to take a printed report to your church council meeting, you can do this from this screen and a few other screens. And this is probably one of the most important selectors, and this is the date selector. The date selector allows you to choose by a date range that you input, any months, any quarters, or your fiscal years. You can see I have 2 2016s up here. That's because I was giving a demonstration where we had a fiscal year that was split, ended in June and then started in July. So Ledger will remember that for you. The other thing to be aware of on your home screen here, this is the list of all your transactions. You can always access any transaction from this home screen by clicking on it, and then it will take you to that transaction view. And we'll talk a little bit later as well about editing transactions if you ever need to do that. But I'm going to get started at the top here. We're going to kind of start as if you've never been in Ledger before. What are the first things you want to do? So the first thing you'll want to do if you didn't have anything was to check your church's settings. And to do that, you go to the settings cog and then just click on this general button. In your general settings, you can change your church name. Your customer number is the internal number that we at CTS use to identify you. That's why it's not editable. You can choose your check style. So if you have top printed checks or middle printed checks, you can select that here. If you're a church where maybe the pastor and the treasurer needs to sign off and you have those two signature checks, you can check that here and then also put in your church address and your church phone. And then if we had changed anything today, I would just click the quick save button to get those going. Once you have your general settings set up, next thing you're going to want to do is to set up a book. And we'll show you how quick and easy it is to set up a new book here. Just click on the settings cog and then select books. You can see the complete list of books is here. You can filter and search by them. So if I had a large number of books for some reason, which we don't recommend, but maybe some churches might, you can always search by name in the filter bar there. To add a new one, you can just put in your book here. So if you had a preschool book and then you select the starting month for your fiscal year, we'll say January, and then the starting date of your activity in that book. So if you wanted to go back and enter transactions back to a certain date, you'd have to make sure the starting date aligned with that regardless of when your fiscal year started. So you can do that there. Once you have all of that ready, you can just click submit and that will create your book. You can see you get this notification message up here. And now if I go to my book selector, I can select preschool from my list of books here and it's all ready to go. I'm going to go back to our church book very quickly. After you create your books, you'll also want to set up your chart of accounts. And this is probably the most important thing you'll want to do. So to set up your chart of accounts, you will go to the settings cog and then click on chart of accounts right here up at the top. We'll just give it a minute to refresh there. So this is what your chart of accounts looks like. I'm going to zoom back out on my screen so you can see these four items: assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. So if you're familiar with finance, these terms are something you use all the time. You're very used to them. If you're not, we always have a help article here. You can click on it here and it will let you know, if you search for it, what type of account you're looking for. So assets, real quickly, are items your congregation owns. So it can be money, building, land, or equipment. You can have current assets or fixed assets. Liabilities are things your congregation owes a debt to, but not quite that often. So if you pay payroll through Ledger, if you track that, you can see you can track your liabilities with your federal, state taxes. And these are all categories I put in myself when I was starting my book. You can always add a new account or a new category depending on your church's plan. And then we have our income and expense accounts. And you can see here is where we get into the nitty-gritty about Ledger. So income are accounts related to your sources of revenue. So you can see I have an in-depth, pretty in-depth income accounts chart here. So you can see that we have both categories and accounts. The difference between an account and a category is that a category holds a group of accounts. So you can see right here under my youth and young adults, this is a category. It's signified by this kind of teal colored bar on the left here. And the total in the right side of the category, equals the total of any accounts under that category, which you can see by the indentation here. Now, if for some reason you didn't want this category or you decided that the youth fund was not under this category, you can just use your cursor to move that out. And I think hopefully you notice as soon as I move that back out, this total here changed to 135 instead of that 455 15 number. I can move it back and there it goes back to 4 cents. So you can do this with any number of category and accounts. In our example today, like I said, we are going to be adding some accounts and categories for the music at our church. So you can see I've already made a music category and I've made an account for general music income. Now it's easy to add another account under there. So if you knew that you were getting income or donations maybe just tied to choral music, say, you could do choral music. If you have a numbering system at your church, you can enter that here in the account number and then you'll be asked to add an initial balance. I'm just going to put 0 for our example today. And then as soon as that's ready, you'll click submit. You can see it's added to the bottom there. To get this within the music category, all we have to do is scroll up here and then add it wherever you want under the music category. So I'm going to add choral music. I'm going to add, maybe you have someone at your church who is really interested in bringing in money for organ music. We can add that. And then I can also add one for handbell music. Then you can just rearrange these again however you wish. And then indent them as need be. You can see it turns a little bit darker over here. Well, also, I'm going to save my changes before I forget. So as soon as you save changes, you'll always get this confirmation box, and it'll let you know how many accounts you've created or deleted if that's what you were doing. From this screen, you can either discard your changes, and that will reset, your chart of accounts to the way it was before, or you can just confirm the changes you made. Now I'm just going to do the same under my expenses to keep my events organized. You can see I have a lot more expense accounts because I really want to be intentional at tracking how everything is spent. We're going to add a new category since I don't have a music category in here now. We'll do music expenses. And I can't seem to type today. Sorry about that. We'll submit it. You can see that teal bar comes on the left side. That's how you know it's a category. And then I'll do the same thing. So I'll add choral. And if you're coming from another software, from a paper book, you might have initial balances in here. But since we're not today, I'm just going to add 0 for all the salt and hand, bell, 0 count. And then you can also do organ music. And then I'll also make an expense category. Oh, and you can see that was a good example there. If you forget to add an initial balance, Ledger won't let you save without filling that out. It's just one of the checks we have built in the system. Again, that's kind of fits into that category of things that the software checks for, even if you didn't have ill intentions, just to make sure you get everything right the first time. And I'll just do general music expenses and add my initial balance of 0 right here. I'm going to add all of these as accounts under that category so that when we start adding expenses later, you can always change it. And you can always change the name of these things. Like, for example, if I decided later I wanted choral music to be named choir music, all you have to do is click in the name and submit it. You can change the beginning balances up until the point of your first reconciliation. I know when a lot of people get started, they're just kind of playing around in their chart of accounts and they're not really sure how they want things set up. That's okay, just don't reconcile until you know you have your chart of accounts set. Otherwise, that can create some problems and some extra work for you. I think this is the way we want it, so I'm going to save my changes right now. And again, you can see I had 1 new category created and 4 new accounts created. And I'll confirm that for today. The next thing, I'm going to save my changes here. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. One more thing before we get into budgets, let's talk about fiscal years very quickly. If your church, I know I've gotten some emails over time from people who have said, oh, my church is on a January to December fiscal year right now, but we're thinking about switching to a July to June fiscal year. How do we do that? You can always do this from settings and fiscal years. And so there's a few things to know here. This unlock button or lock button tells you if a fiscal year is locked. So since it's January, I was just doing this morning where I had started my new fiscal year in January, but I remembered that I didn't add all my offering batches from 2016. And my fiscal year, this fiscal year, had been locked at the time. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I can't add it in. If that ever happens to you, don't worry. You'll just have to unlock your fiscal year, and then it will let you enter transactions for a fiscal year back. And just click the button to lock it again. Your current fiscal year is always listed up here. If at any time you want to change the starting month of your fiscal year, you can do that down here. So if I were to change my fiscal year to July, it would create a partial fiscal year from January 2017 until the end of June 2017. That would be what would be listed up here. And then starting July 1st, 2017, it would give me a new fiscal year. And as you can see, you can do that for any month. So if you're sitting there wondering, oh, my church isn't on the same fiscal year, that's okay. You can always change that in settings there. But again, that's something to do right when you get started before you start entering a lot of transactions. Now that we're done with fiscal years and charts of accounts, the next thing I want to go over to is your budgets. And we do budgets after your chart of accounts because the chart of accounts shows up in your budgets view here. And you have a couple options from within budgets. You can export to Excel, and you can also select your date. This becomes very important. My computer's running a little slow here. When you're in between fiscal years or coming to the end of one fiscal year and another, you can see that you can always set a budget for the fiscal year that's coming up to help you plan. And then you can always look at your past fiscal year budgets. You can see that since this is a new fiscal year, I haven't entered many of my budgets. Entering budgets is very simple. If you know the category total, it will always add up for you. So all you need to do is enter the accounts totals. You can see that below, let me zoom in a little bit here again so you can see for sure. You can see that in any account, you're always able to see your previous year's budget and your previous year's actual. So if you're making decisions about a fiscal year coming up and you want to know how much you spent last year, you can always do that here. So you can see here, it looked like I had budgeted $50 a month for the education fund, and our donors were very generous and gave much more over that each month. So I think for this coming year, maybe I'll allot $200 a month to my general education fund. And you can use this just using your arrow keys. I know you guys can't see me using my keyboard right now, but to move over, I'm just using the tab key. And then I can also use the enter key to move down. One more thing to note here. If you know the entire budget for your whole year, you can enter this in the total column just like I did. And if you see that, you can see that it divided up per month. Now, what I really should have done was entered 2,400 here, and that would divide it up by 200 each month. Now, you don't have to do it that way. And a perfect example for this is something like VBS. So for VBS, maybe you have donors, one very faithful donor, and they give you $50 every month of the year. It doesn't matter what month it is. But as you're nearing closer to VBS, maybe in June or July, your church might hold a special donations drive for VBS, and you start getting more and more donations. So say maybe in May you get $100, in June you get $500, and in July you get $1,000 worth of donations. You can enter these budgets by month or by the year, and that's for scenarios like this with VBS, where you might have 1 or 2 months where you're really high on donations and the rest is kind of steady. The other option you have is if you have something, we'll use a fall festival for that example. Say that for a fall festival you had budgeted $800 for that year. So it's dividing these up equally by month. But then halfway through the year you saw it was wrong and you wanted to change this. Changing one of these cells, even though you've added it in the total, won't mess anything up. So if you decided that in May you wanted to budget $150 and move that, you can see changing the subsequent months won't change these previous months here, and your total always updates. So this is what I was talking about when I said Ledger is efficient. You don't have to do much of the math outside the program, especially with dividing, adding, and subtracting. Ledger always does all that math for you and gives you all the data you need. Now, since we were talking about music earlier, I want to make sure that I set my music budget for the year, just so we have something. I'm going to start adding in some income and expenses later. So let's say our budget for the general fund for music was $500 a year, and maybe I knew that I wanted to spend $100 a year on choral music, $75 a year on organ music, and $50 a year on handbell music. I can always do that there. If you get about halfway through and you realize you entered something incorrectly, there's always this reset button. I know I've used that a couple times. And your Save Changes button. And you can see I got a message right at the top here that my budgets were updated. Now, if you're someone who likes to work in Excel, if this view isn't what you want, if you want to do more of the math in Excel and then just key everything into Ledger, you're definitely able to do this. This was a feature we just added this fall, and it was something that a lot of our customers had been asking for. So I just want to show you how to do that very quickly. So you can export your budgets to Excel, and it usually takes a minute. You can see that it just appears in my downloads bar here. And if you guys just give me a minute for my computer to get open, I will get this spreadsheet right over here. Hold on. Sorry, thanks for being patient, guys. Here we go. Okay, so this is what the budgets view looks like in Excel. Let me just expand this a little. So anything you had added in previously comes in here. You can see there's even some formulas that carry over. Now, if you wanted to, say I wanted to redo my entire music budget, you have a couple options for that. I'm just using my arrow keys right here. I'm going to clear all of this out. Say I just wanted to redo this category and that I wanted to change it so I had $800 in the general fund, and that I wanted $500 in choral, and I wanted $250 in organ and $100 in handbell. You can do this just for one column like this, or you could do it all across the rows. I'm just going to do one column like this right now. But once you get everything set in Excel, all you need to do is copy and paste. I'm just going to use Control-C, but you can also just use this copy right here. Then you can go back into Ledger and paste your values in, and you can see my values updated very quickly. And then any of the math I had previously had over here carried over. So that's a nice feature if you want to switch between working in Ledger and Excel. You can always do that. You can import or copy and paste in this whole table if you wish. You can do just one part at a time. It's really up to you and your church what you would like. We're going to pretend I went through my budgets for the whole year, and you can see we have quite a few here. I'm going to also allot for expenses for the year. So I think we said 800, 500, and 250 and 100. Oh. There we go. And I'm just going to save changes right now. You can see while it's saving, it kind of gets a little grayed out there, and then I know my budgets were updated when I get this confirmation message. So now that we've done those budgets and we've done the chart of accounts, we are going to start entering some transactions. And before I go to individual transactions, I just want to talk about a few key types of transactions. We have just a regular transaction. We'll go through each of these 5 types in a minute, but we also have recurring and imported transactions. So a recurring transaction is something that sets to happen the same time every month. So if you have payday once a month or twice a month, you can set that here in your recurring transactions. You can set your electric bills, any health insurance, and then you can always access the list of these through your recurring transactions view. To set a recurring transaction, all you have to do is do a new transaction, and I'll just do a transfer for my example now. And say maybe you transfer money from your checking to your savings every month. You do transfer, monthly transfer. And I'll just pick a date right here, and then you choose your asset account, and then you choose your other account, and then you can see that the debits and credits calculate automatically for you. And this is a nice feature for those of us who aren't used to working in church finance. I know if you asked me what a debit and a credit was in all these different scenarios, I probably would get it wrong 50% of the time. But all you need to know is where the money's coming from and where the money's going to use Ledger, and then Ledger calculates for it. Again, in this scenario, we're making a recurring transfer. So all you have to do for that is do make recurring. And then you have this option. You can call it a monthly transfer, whatever you wish. You can edit this, delete it, rename it. And then you get to choose the amount of recurrence. So if it occurs every week, month, or year, and then you can choose the frequency here, and then you can choose either by day of the week, or if you go to month, you can choose the first Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or you can choose the actual day of the month. So if we said this always happens on the 26th day of the month, we can do that. If it happens every other month, the third or fourth months are good if you're doing something quarterly. So you can do save here. Recurring transaction was created. And then you can see that my monthly transfer was added to the bottom here. If at any point you wish to edit this, you can click on it from that recurring transactions view, and then you'll just click this update button to update that recurring transaction. So this would be something that would be especially helpful once the new calendar year comes out. So if you have different salaries or different withholding amounts, you can keep the recurring transaction in there. You don't have to create two, but you can change the amounts depending on what year it is. Recurring transactions always show up here in your pending transactions view. So you can see, in addition to those two pending transactions I had earlier, it added my monthly transfer for today. So if I wanted to make this recurring transaction a reality, I would just click on the name here. And then so I could add a specific description for this instance of recurrence. So I could say monthly transfer for January 2017. And then I would save it. And the saving action is what actually takes the money and transfers it between your accounts in Ledger. The other set of transactions we have are imported transactions. So we know that many of our churches use paychecks to calculate payroll, and so we have this option. If you want to import transactions from paychecks, you can do this through the file here. If you're one of those churches, I believe we have an article in our help system over here. This help system is page sensitive, so you can always search for it or search a specific article. Or if you can't find the article you're looking for, you can call us or you can send us a message. The nice thing about sending us a message is that when you do it through Ledger versus sending us an email, it automatically sends not only your message, but also all your contact information there. I always think that's a nice feature, so you don't have to do that extra work of typing in your name and email all the time. Couple more things before I show you those 5 transaction types, and this has to do more with the accountability I was talking about earlier. There's users and roles. We're going to go to roles first. So roles are different permission levels that apply to different people at your church. So you can see every book has an administrator role. This is not an option. You need one person at your church who can see and do everything. So that's built into Ledger. But all of these roles listed under administrator role were roles that I had created for an example. So see, if you had a children's ministry director, you get to choose what books any role applies to. You can choose which accounts that person can see. So you can see in my children's ministry example, that person can only view a certain subset of accounts. So they can view the education account and the VBS account. Now, if you ever want to change a role, it's really super simple. You just re-click on these options here. I think I added some more children's ministry. You can also add the book here. And this saves automatically. So once you're done, hopefully you can see there's a little gray circle with an X that appears. You can do that. And you can see that now it says this person can view 8 selected accounts. you can choose if somebody is able to manage your chart of accounts. For most ministry directors, that won't be the case. You'll probably just want your financial treasurer or accountant to do that. And then you can also choose which types of transaction that person has control over. So if you want that person to be able to deposit money but not write checks, or only write checks and deposit but not transfer money, you can customize those preferences here. And then click Submit. And this message at the top will let you know that your role was updated. So you can see we can do this for everyone. If you want to add a new role, maybe you wanted to add the music director role. Again, you can choose which books it applies to. If the music director was shared by this church and school, you can select both books here. And instead of letting this person, again, view all their accounts, we'll select the subset of accounts. And then I want this person to be able to deposit money and print checks and create checks, but not be able to print them. We'll say maybe we save creation for the ministry director, but the treasurer might need to be the one to print those things. So we'll click Submit here. Then I have to click back on this to select which accounts. And this only happens when you're creating the new role. So you can see I chose all the church accounts here, and since it's music, I want to go down to our last music. And you can select anything under a category, or you could select specific accounts. So I'll do that account. And then we'll also do our music expenses account we just had here. Again, this portion saves automatically, so you can just close out when you're done. And then when you're completely done, you'll click Submit, and then it'll let you know the role was updated. After you have all your roles in, you'll want to invite users. So users always apply to roles. These are the different people who have those roles, and you can see here that you can have any combination of roles. So in my test account here, I'm the administrator, but I also have one of our fictional people, Sue Abbott here. She is administrator, financial secretary, and treasurer. Maybe if she wasn't an administrator anymore, I could take that one role off. I could submit that, and then it updates automatically. And hopefully you saw too, you can also resend an invitation. So if you're getting started up and you add someone to your church and they say, oh my gosh, I didn't get the invitation, you can do that yourself. Again, you don't have to call our support team here. If you wanted to invite a new person here, let me just get one of our emails. You just click Add a New One. You put in that person's email, and then we'll say that Kira Belton here was the music director. I'll click Submit. As soon as I click Submit, you can see this message up here changed to let me know that the user was created and has been notified via email. Now, users and roles all come together in the event log. And let me show you that. Event log's listed under reports here. And this is where the accountability aspect comes in that I brought up a couple times in the intro. The event log contains very important information. It gives you a timestamp for when any actions take place. I'm just going to zoom in again. So it gives you a timestamp, it gives you the date and the very specific time, even down to the second here. It can tell you what happened. So if you're creating a transaction, if this was that transaction I created a few moments ago, and then it tells you what was updated. So you can see here when I made all those changes to budgets, it let me know every single change that took place. Now this is especially important. We don't have a lot of users in here, but you can group by user. So if you want to see all the transactions maybe just your music director made, you can group that here. And then if there's a specific transaction number, you can access that from the event log. So you can see I can click on this, and it'll take me exactly to that transfer I did, and I can even edit or void that here. The other cool thing in the event log is you can filter by view. So if you just wanted to see any transactions where something was destroyed, you can see that here. And you can see, oh my gosh, I only have one destroyed transaction here. Well, if you go back throughout the previous year, you can see I have a whole bunch of different transactions, and you can use that same filter right there. You can also filter these by type of transaction, and again, user if I had more than one user here. And it looks like I got a little bug where that's flying over the top there. We'll just refresh. So those are the main things about users, roles, and books. Before I do transactions, I do want to set up a payee, and a payee is a very simple concept. For most of us, it's just someone you make payments to. So you can see we make all these payments here. I've done a lot of webinars, so that's why I have a bunch of CPH ones here. But in our example for today, since we've been talking about the music department, we're going to use the fictional example that there was a business in your area maybe that did tailoring. So I'll do first tailoring shop, and you can put an address in here, 1234 Seamstress Lane. We'll say this is in St. Louis, Missouri. You can put as much or as little information as here as you want. You just need to make sure you do have that name or it won't save. So we'll put in their phone number. And you can also add a note. So we could say this was the choir robe tailor. As soon as you're done with that payee, you'll click submit and it will let you know that the payee was created. If at any time you wanted to delete a payee, you can. So you can just click on this little minus sign here, but before you do that, you might want to check to see if there are any accounts or transactions associated with that payee. Ledger will not let you delete a payee if there are any transactions associated with that payee, and again, that's just another check and balance to make sure that you don't accidentally delete something that you need later. You can pick this deactivate button and then it will let you know it was deactivated. So now that we have our payee set up, we have our users set up, we're going to do a couple things here, and I'm going to go straight from the top. We did a transfer. Let's show you how quick and easy it is to do a deposit. So to do deposit, all you need to do is click on deposit. You can do a memo here. So if you're depositing, maybe somebody made a donation for choir robes. You could pick the date. You can go back on this. So maybe somebody handed you the check on Sunday, but you didn't get time to enter it until Thursday. You can select a payee when appropriate. That'll come into play definitely when we're entering payments. And then you just select the asset and income accounts. So we'll say that it was deposited into your checking account, but you want it to be applied to your general music fund right there. And you can see again the debits and credits calculate automatically. One more thing to be careful of, if you accidentally made a typo and say you put in $500 instead of $50, Ledger gives you a couple clues to let you know you can't save your transaction. One is that if any time the amounts don't balance out, Ledger will add another line at the bottom here to let you know that your accounts don't balance. If for some reason you don't notice that, Ledger also will stop you from saving this transaction. So if I try and click save now, you can see I get this reddish orange alert box up top, and it let me know the transaction could not be created because line items must sum to 0. So it's saying the credits equal 50 and the debits equal 500. And that does not equal 0 if you were trying to balance them out. So if you wanted to, you can just go change it up here. You'll see as soon as I change it to balance out, this second line goes away because you know your transaction is balanced. I just click save here, and then you can see when you go to your screen up here, it got applied to your asset account. You can see this happened right here. Here's your deposit. And then if I go again to my home screen, just give me one more minute. There we go. And then we could say the income, and if I go over here, you can scroll through all your different income accounts here. Hopefully I'll be able to find my music ministries. And notice these are by category up here, and you can see my deposit was made. Now I have $500 in my music ministry account. So say I got that $500 and I wanted to write a check to that seamstress company I set up before. You'll just do transaction and then check. And then you'll go new choir robes. You could put in the memo. You can click the date, and then you can select the payee right here. So if I start typing Taylor, you can see that first tailoring shop comes in. You can enter a check number if you wish, and then you just select your account. So this is coming from our music asset account for $500. And then it's getting deducted from our music expense account. So let me find it here. Actually, I should probably type this in. And I'll take that from general music. You can see I have a little notification here. And it lets me know my check was added to my print queue. Now the print queue is a place, if you are making a lot of transactions at one time, and maybe you didn't want to make a transaction, print one, print one, they're all added to your print queue. And then when you're ready to print your checks, you can just select which checks or all of them, and then you have two options. You can either mark them as printed, which takes them out of your print queue. So if you maybe wanted to enter your checks electronically, but then you actually wrote the checks out by hand, I would recommend using the Mark as Printed button, or you could actually print them if you bought checks and printed them through your printer. So either option is available with Ledger. I'm going to choose Mark as Printed now since we don't have a printer hooked up to my computer at this moment. And then you'll have a confirmation box, again just letting you know that once you mark these as printed, that they will disappear from your print queue. Next, we're going to do a payment, and I know when I first started looking at Ledger, I was like, why is there a difference between payments and checks? And the good rule of thumb here is that checks are anything you physically write or print a check for, and then payments are for electronic payments. So say we wrote that check to the tailoring company in town, but then I wanted to buy my choral music online from CPH. You can do that as well. So we can maybe just write in here, choir music for Lent and Easter. Since we know that's coming up, you would choose your payee. I'll choose CPH here, and then again you select where the money is coming from. So we can select our checking account here. We'll say maybe we paid $50, and then we can go to our expenses account here. See, I had some other ones. We'll say this was for choir music. We can also divide this up, I believe. So if we wanted to make one big payment to CPH, maybe we bought 3 different things. So maybe this was $100. And you can see it adds an extra amount here again to let you know what's missing. So we had 25 and 25 right here. So now that it's balanced out, all these numbers disappeared, and then I can just click Save. And again, the transaction was created. You can see since we selected payment in this instance, it was not added to my print queue because when you select payment, Ledger knows that there's not going to be a printed check associated with that. Couple other transaction types here. We've gone through these top 4. Journal entries are a more advanced feature. If you're a seasoned accountant, you'll know exactly what to do with journal entries. If you're not, you don't have to do anything with journal entries because if you ever edit a transaction, Ledger will track that for you. Probably one of the most common instances of people using journal entries are if somebody wants to make an interest payment, for example. The only difference really between this journal entry screen and other screens is that the debits and credits are not automatically calculated for you, and you have to calculate those yourself. Okay, so as we were talking about journal entries, as I said, there's 2 ways really that Ledger can track a journal entry, and one is just manually putting that in if you want to manually put your corrections. The other way is that you can edit a transaction and Ledger will automatically create a journal entry for you. So we're going to use my example for my CPH payment here. So I'm going to go up here. And I have a couple options. If I entered this in error, I can always void this transaction. And if you void it, it will appear on the main screen kind of a light gray color. Let me go back. I'm going to go back to 2016. I know I had some voided transactions here. You can see here was my last voided transaction. If I don't hover over it, you can see it's a little lighter gray and it has this no sign there. So that's a good way to track whether or not you voided a transaction. But if I just wanted to edit a transaction, you can always do that here. So maybe I was making a payment to CPH and I wanted it to, I forgot the shipping. So maybe the shipping was $5. And I wanted to split that up evenly, or if you had a different shipping account, you could. You can do that there. And then you can see, instead of saying create here, it'll say save. And it says a new transaction was created for this correction. So you can see that my correction is listed here. But then if I go to my general ledger report, you can see that ledger right here in this highlighted area automatically made that correction for me. So it didn't affect my original transaction, but ledger created a journal entry for me. So that's the other way you can get into journal entries and actually check changes over time. You'll also notice that that will appear in the event log, and it will tell you the original transaction and also the transaction number that was revised. Couple more things about transactions before I get into reports. Just want to show you quickly, I mentioned a couple times how if you have offering batches that you record in Church360 members, those come over to Ledger automatically. Those always appear in your pending transactions view, and you can see I have 2 batches here. So this was one of my offering batches that I put in this morning. So I could say offerings for January 15th, 2017. Again, I won't select a payee because it's just a deposit, and then I'll select the asset account that these were deposited into, and then you can see we have different funds here. Now, it might look like we're doubling up on funds, but this is to help you out. This fund name right here is the fund name in Ledger, and then this fund named kind of that colored looking box is the fund name in members. Now mine automatically matched up because I've done a deposit here between members and Ledger, and once you do one deposit it automatically remembers which funds you want to match. But if for some reason you change your mind, you can always go back and then re-key in any fund you want. So if you wanted to match education or something else, you can always do that, and you could click save. And my deposit was automatically created, and you can see that it will appear here. So we'll just do that one more time. My $500 I'll deposit it into my checking account, and maybe this was a donation for Oregon. Do that here again. Here is the name of that fund and members that you've set up, and here's the name of the fund in Ledger. Awesome. A couple other things to show you in the main screen here with your expenses, and I'm going to go back to 2016 again just because I have a lot more transactions in 2016 than I do for 2017. You can see there's this little lock button here, and that means you've reconciled, and I haven't reconciled in a while, but if you scroll down long enough, you can see that any reconciled transaction comes up with a lock on it. If I were to try and edit one of these transactions, I couldn't because of 2 reasons. One, it's letting me know the fiscal year is closed, and the other reason is that I've already reconciled that transaction. So Ledger won't let you edit anything that has appeared on your bank statement and that you have reconciled. And again, that's just another protection for you to make sure that you're doing things correctly. To reconcile one of your accounts, all you have to do is click on Ads and then click that account right here, and then click this green Reconcile button. It'll give you any date and time frame, so I can move this to 2017 if I want. I'm going to click Reconcile, and then you can see this Reconcile screen appears very different than any of the other screens in Ledger, and that's because it is different. All you need to do is click your statement date. So say I hadn't reconciled a few months, which is not best practice, but I know it can happen sometimes. Your dates, your transactions that show up here are dependent upon your statement dates. So you can see that I don't have any transactions that occurred after November 22nd here because it's trying to keep you really focused on whatever period you want. You would just copy all of this information from your bank account, and then line by line you would check off which transaction do a reconciling. It'll tell you what your selected difference is and what your statement difference is, and if you're off by anything. Ledger will not let you save the reconciliation if this off by is anything other than 0. Since we don't have a big account for our fictional church, I'm not going to go through all of that today. Just know you can always access that by going into Assets, selecting your specific asset, and then clicking Reconcile. The next thing we'll want to do is go through reports. You can do that by clicking on a reports button. Again, here's the general ledger report. You can see that this includes journal entries, deposits and payments, and checks. So there's a few different ways you can look at this. And notice we're back in 2016. That's why I have all those. You can group by payee. So if that's easier to read, you can see these are transactions that didn't have any payee. If I scroll down far enough, you can see that my payees are listed here in the bigger letters, and then any payments associated with them are listed below. You can group by account. And again, this doesn't have any listed there. And then you can also select a specific account. So if I wanted to select my general fund, I can do that there, and I can ungroup. So you can group and ungroup as many things as you want. I'm going to uncheck this here. You can group by different types. So if you just wanted to look at all your checks in here to see which ones have cleared, you have that option. Let me refresh quickly here. There we go. You can see all the checks that we had made out this past year. So that's a really nice feature. Again, in this view, you can export to Excel. And I believe that if you've grouped by payee or account, those large groupings will also show up in that Excel export for you. Your income and expense report just shows your income and expenses for the year. You can see I have 2016 on here, and the income is listed up top, and then our expenses are listed down below. You can see this is where expenses part start. You can expand or collapse these. So if you just wanted the real quick on the down and dirty income minus expenses, you can look at that here. You have your budget, your actual, your percent of budget, and remaining. So you see if I go to 2017, it'll probably tell a much different story since I haven't set my budgets in there yet. You also have your chart of accounts, and this includes both your income, expenses, and assets and liabilities. You can also expand or collapse here by category. So you can see that a couple times here. And then you can also use these smaller categories. So maybe you just wanted to see the subcategories, but not each account. You can do that there, and then export to Excel as much or as little as you want. And then the fourth account type is your balance sheet, where you have assets less liabilities to give you your total equity. So you get your starting balance, ending balance for this time frame, and then your debits, credits, dollars change over time, and percent change over time. And that is about it. We got through a lot. I know I went a little bit over my hour allotment. We're just going to go through a few more slides, and then if you have any questions, now is a great time to get those started. So I'm going to go back to my slides now. One thing I'd encourage you to do if you haven't already is to start your free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. This is 37 days. If you've attended one of our other webinars before, you know that the trial is 30 days. But for Ledger, we give you an extra 7 days, and that's to give you time to get your bank account statement and reconcile. We really want you to be able to test every single aspect of Ledger before you make a decision about buying, so that you know what's right for your church. We'd hate for you to try it and then find out later you weren't doing something. Here also is my contact information, and I also contacted the software sales line if anyone is at the point where they wanted to purchase. You can definitely call them at any time. One thing I did not put in here is our support line. For current customers, our support is always there. It's included in part of your transaction fee. And even for some of your questions today, if I'm not able to answer it, I will get you in touch with a support person who can help you out. I see we have one question about account numbers. We can, oh, there's my background. Let me get Ledger back up here. go. Yes, we do have account numbers in here. There's one thing to be aware of when you're doing account numbers. I'm going to go back in chart of accounts here. And so Alan was asking, do you notice account numbers? I noticed there was a box for that when creating the new account. Yes, you can use account numbers, and you can see right here is where you put in your account numbers. We didn't automatically include account numbers because we knew some churches didn't use those. We got feedback about that before we're developing. So the account number is optional. There's no automatic numbering system there, and you do have a few options. We've had a couple people say that they entered the account number in this box, but it doesn't show off when you're printing your chart of accounts. So if you want any of your reports to print with both the name and the account number in there, so I'll just do, maybe we'll do second checking account. Another alternative way to do that would be to add it in here, and then that will show when you're printing. Oh, I gotta write my initial balance in here. So those are one of two ways you can add those account numbers in there, Alan. Okay. Where is the fund balance indicated on the balance sheet, Tom? Let's go back to the balance sheet. Tom is asking about the fund balance. So Tom, I think what you're asking is that this ending column would give you what's remaining in your fund for your assets and liabilities account. So the dollar change would be the starting minus these dollars, and then your ending balance would be listed in this middle account here. Hopefully I got that. And we also have some CPH trivia that one of our attendees is the descendant of an early manager at CPH. That's always really cool. The more I'm here, the more I like to hear about that. So Tom and Alan, thank you for your questions. If I didn't answer them correctly, or if I didn't understand what you're saying, you can do that. Paul is also asking where dedicated accounts are. So if you are coming over from Shepherd staff, you'll be used to the concept of dedicated accounts. We don't have something called dedicated accounts in Ledger. We have restricted funds. So let me show you. I didn't show that in chart of accounts. So thanks for bringing that up. Let me click on my gear here. So as I understand it, a dedicated account in Shepherd staff is an allotment of money that is given for a specific purpose that can't be used for something else. So its equivalent in Ledger is something called a restricted fund, and you can add that under your assets here. So if you had a restricted fund, maybe for your altar guild, you can just click on that restricted fund button there and then click submit, and then your restricted fund is listed underneath there. So you can see that your unrestricted is listed up top here, and then each of your restricted funds, which are kind of like dedicated accounts in Shepherd staff, are listed down there, and you can do that for any asset account. Hopefully that answers your question, Paul. Okay. It's 10 after 2, almost, and so I don't see any more questions. Let me just quickly put my contact number up again on the screen, and it'll give me just a second to get organized. Hold on there. Okay. There we go. Sorry for being slow there. Oh. I'll go all the way to the end here, and I'll get my account information up there. There we go. Okay, it looks like I answered Paul's question. I'll just give you a few more minutes with my contact information up there. Again, if I went through something too quickly, please just ask me, send me an email, or call me. And I'll also send out the recording hopefully by the end of the day today. I'll try and get that out by 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon. So thanks everybody for coming, and we hope that you enjoyed this webinar. Bye.